Hey, what's happening, guys? Dan Darrow here with another Options and Play video update. We are into very late August, and normally that's kind of a quiet stretch for earnings, but the way this coming week lines up, actually pretty busy, especially if you like software. Lots and lots of big software reports. So before the open on Monday, there's actually nothing scheduled. After the close on Monday is when things kind of get going. So Palo Alto, about 20.5 points is what they're looking for. It's finally starting to break through the top of like this really long-term resistance range. You can see um, it has a head of steam going to earnings. They put together a solid quarter in June, but it wasn't really rewarded that quarter. I will say this setup is much different than it was in June. Expectations are definitely higher, but it still seems like there could be room to keep going if they report good numbers. So thinking about something bullish on this one. For the open on Tuesday, so Best Buy, about 875 or so is what's priced in here. I mean, it's literally just been running nonstop since they gave a sales update in July, and expectations seem high. Option pricing seems pretty high. And I personally avoid most of the time companies that guide early. So if they give preliminary numbers, I tend to avoid it on the actual earnings report. So I'm probably going to be leaving this one alone. Medtronic, so big healthcare name. About 3.5 points is what's priced in. Definitely had a more muted move on earnings in May, and it really hasn't done a whole lot since then. Pricing not too bad, but it's also typically not really a big mover. I really feel like there's better setups than this next week out there, so I'm probably going to focus my attention elsewhere. After the close on Tuesday, so Salesforce, this is a big one. About 12.5 points is what's priced in on this. It's had a pretty solid run the last few days. It's just at or right around its 52-week high, back above 200. Last quarter was more mixed though, and while I mean I do think there is potential here, especially to like close a little bit of a valuation gap it has with some of its peers. Um, does seem kind of like a tougher earnings trade. I typically like this stock more as like a swing candidate than an earnings play. But maybe if it's like very good and the stock gaps, maybe it could really start to run. So I feel like if anything, maybe I'll look at something speculative, bullish, like low debit the money on this one, just in case it kind of gaps and runs. Into it. So about 17 points is what's expected on this. TurboTax, that's this company, should have had a solid quarter because of the extended tax filing deadline, right? I felt like this could be one that rallies ahead of time, and it's really starting to move that direction. So I feel like whether or not this is a trade on earnings is really going to depend on how much it runs prior to earnings. So this is like a wait and see. Autodesk, 19 points is what's priced in here. Another very bullish pattern. I mean, just a tight bull flag underneath 250. Stock looks solid. It's trying to work out of this consolidation. It doesn't always have huge moves, so you kind of need to weigh the risk of more expensive options with the stock near its high, but I mean, definitely could be worth a look. Also on Tuesday after the close is Nordstrom. So about $2 is what's priced in on this. So software stocks at their 52-week high, high expectations, right? Nordstrom definitely not high expectations. Kohl's was not good. It dragged Nordstrom down with it. This can report much different numbers occasionally than say like a Kohl's or a Macy's. So to me, I know it's dropped and I know expectations are low, but it could set up pretty well for a volatility strategy, especially because there's a pretty high short interest on it. For the open on Wednesday, Dick's. So 475-ish is what's priced in here. Sporting goods has been kind of an under the radar great spot in retail. Dick's just off its recent high, but still underneath the 2020 high. I feel like it might have room to 50 if they really crush it, because I mean it seems like a pretty obvious like upside target. So it's priced in 475. Seems like it has a path to like 4 to 5. So I feel like if I did anything, probably view it more bullish, but also I'd have to get risk down on it. After the close on Wednesday, more software. So Splunk, about 18 and a half points is what's priced in here. Um, Definitely, I felt it was more of a sloppy quarter in May, but the stock actually reacted very strongly. Um, and it is off its high now, but I don't think if it has like a similar report, it's going to get the same treatment again, because they've really been punishing a lot of like mixed or less than stellar software numbers. And also, what makes me a little bit more cautious on this too is that Datadog, AYX, New Relic, they were all hit, and they're kind of in like that same space. Box, another software name. So about 250 is what's priced in. Those are monthly options, though. It's not my favorite stock most of the time, but it does tend to move pretty consistently on earnings. Option pricing, not too bad, even though you got to pay for the monthly contracts. But this is also kind of like lower in my list of names for next week. Williams Sonoma. So 11 and a half points is what they're looking for here. Those are monthly options. This is one of the better performing retail stocks. Housing, home furnishings has been very strong. Williams Sonoma is coming off a great quarter. So I imagine this is going to be solid. Chart looks like you could have more room, but I mean, expectations are also pretty high here. But also, solid pattern, got a little momentum. Coming off a good quarter, so maybe something bullish on the more speculative end of the spectrum there. Before they open on Thursday, so Dollar General, which is pricing in about 11 and a half, and Dollar Tree. So I'm gonna lump these two together. Of the two, I'd say Dollar Tree looks more interesting to me, just from a trade perspective, and it's because you can see very clearly that it has this huge gap from November of last year, and it's been lagging DG like substantially too. So this is probably the one that I focus on just because it seems like a better trade setup, just for like an earnings report. Also, another retailer is Burlington. About 14 to say 14 and a quarter is what they're looking for in this. TJX, Ross stores both reported this week,
Apple
so
asking
that
judge
definitely
to deny
removes some
Fortnite.
of the uncertainty on Burlington. Neither Raw stores or TJX are very good though. So I guess that kind of makes for a low bar on Burlington. I'm on the fence with it. I do still think it could move, but option pricing is kind of high. So I think you're going to have to pick a directional strategy on it, and I'm kind of on the fence with that. All right, after the close on Thursday, more software names. So Workday, 12 and a half points is what's expected here. Of the ones on Thursday, this might be the most interesting, and it's because you can see that it's well off its high from late last year or from last year, right? 2019 high. It's last quarter wasn't a huge beat, but the stock reacted pretty nicely. Um, it's trying to turn a corner. If it can get through 200, it could really have some room to run. But it's really going to have to be solid because, again, there's been a lot of seldom news reactions in software names. So I do think there's a lot of potential if we can get through 200, but it's really going to have to be solid. So definitely more speculative. BMW. So about 9 points is what's priced in here. And the Dell spinoff, probably the biggest catalyst, or in my opinion, is probably going to be the biggest catalyst. And I feel like any big reaction on earnings is probably going to revolve around that, and not necessarily earnings and revenues. So I feel like if you have a strong conviction on that Dell spinoff news, then maybe take a look. If not, I mean, me personally, I might be avoiding it. Okta. So about 1750 or so is what they're looking for here. This one's going to really revolve around how much it runs ahead of earnings because the last few quarters have been solid, but expectations kind of tend to get like out of whack because it does have a history of running into earnings. So I do think the stock looks set up to rally ahead of time. So if it's at a new high or right at its 52-week high, it might not be a lot of room left. But if it kind of chops around down here in 200, maybe take a look at something on the bull side. Marvell. So not a software name, but definitely kind of an interesting tech name. 2.5 points. What's priced in? This had been a leading semi just up until the beginning of August, and then it really turned lower and hasn't had any life to it since. Last quarter was solid though, and most of the 5G related companies have had strong quarters. So I imagine this should be decent. Um, in terms of earnings, I don't know if I'm going to look at it specifically an earnings trade because it doesn't usually have very big moves on earnings. But from like a longer term perspective, this could be kind of interesting, especially if we can get back up maybe above like 36, 37, kind of reestablish some higher support because then I feel like it could really start to regain some of that leadership. And then lastly on Thursday is Ulta. So about 21.5 points is what they're looking for. Definitely usually a volatile retail name. Uh, Kind of a downbeat report from Estee Lauder weighed on it this week. And stock is back into like this big congestion range area. Historically, it's had some huge moves. And 20 points, 21 points, that doesn't seem too bad, especially if it's like surprisingly good or surprisingly bad. So this one might be a decent volatility strategy candidate, especially if the pricing comes down further later in the week. And then that's it because Friday before the open, there's nothing scheduled. All right. So again, like you can see, for late August, pretty busy calendar. So I mean, a lot of big priced in moves, a lot of big names. So I'm expecting a lot of good action. All right. So if you like this video and you're looking for more information on options trading or more information on earnings trading, please follow up with the link in the description of the video for more information on options to play. Hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Stay well, and I will talk to you all on Monday.